This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former House Speaker Joe Mavretic, NC Policy Watch's Chris Fitzsimon, Syndicated columnist John Hood, and Becki Gray from the John Locke Foundation. As we celebrate Easter and our students enjoy a spring break, we don't get a break from politics, and we've got a lot to talk about this week, including Charlotte's so-called bathroom ordinance, political filings for Congress and the state Supreme Court, along with an uprising in the Republican Party. We'll also discuss what happens with coal ash cleanup now that Governor McCrory has dissolved the Coal Ash Commission. Plus, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. But before we begin, all of us here on NC Spin want to send our fellow panelist and good friend Cash Michael prayers and good wishes. Cash has been to the hospital undergoing treatments recently. We want him to know that we're thinking about him and want nothing but restored health and to get him back here on this panel. Let's get started. The city of Charlotte passed an ordinance requiring that businesses in the Queen City could not discriminate against persons based on their sexual preferences or identity. Now, opponents of this measure quickly dubbed it the bathroom bill because it would allow a transgender person to choose the designated bathroom based on their determination of their current sex. Legislators asked Governor McCrory to call a special session to head off the ordinance before it goes into effect April 1, but McCrory said their proposed legislation was too broad and refused to do so. Lawmakers went ahead, had enough votes, and called themselves into session. Joe, as former House Speaker, what do you think of this special session?
Well, I think as a partisan political move in an election year, it was based on the Republicans' polls, and I think it was a good move on several layers. First of all, it was a slapdown for the Charlotte City Council.
Which is largely Democratic.
Secondly, it forced the governor to make a choice. They've passed the bill in the House with some Democratic support. Over in the Senate, the Democrats walked out, did not have the courage to stand and vote. It forces the governor to make a decision on the bill. It also, if he either supports the bill or backs away from it, it forces the Attorney General, his opponent in the general election, to make some kind of a decision. It gives all the members of the House and Senate an issue to campaign on in the general election. And if it becomes North Carolina law requiring the Attorney General to support that law, then it could go on fast track all the way to the Supreme Court. With a 4-4 split, the law stands.
Wow.
So I think it's great politics in a political year. Politics is raw meat business in North Carolina.
John, Governor McCrory refused to call this special session because it included living wage provisions some municipalities had passed, and he said it was too broad. I was sort of the opinion that when the legislature came back into special session, they dealt only with one issue, one specified issue. Is that not right?
Well, they did in the sense that they enacted a bill, one bill, and the bill addressed an ordinance in Charlotte and the possibility that other municipalities might enact something like similar ordinances or other kinds of ordinances. So they probably would argue that they did do the one thing they announced. I think that this special session, you could be for what the legislature did, you could be against what the legislature did, but I think fundamentally the message that it sends is that a colossal failure of leadership in Charlotte. They could have passed a different kind of ordinance. They would not have provoked the legislature to intervene. It was pretty straightforward. They had people on both sides of the should we have an anti-discrimination ordinance who recognized that the bathroom provisions were extreme and indefensible, and they just went ahead and did it anyway. It was
Chris,
foolish.
that raises a good point. The issue of anti-discrimination, I think most all of us can agree on, particularly as it extends even to transgender.
We can't, actually, but go ahead and ask your question.
Well, we should.
Well, okay, go ahead.
That's my editorial
Okay.
comment. But under the circumstances, why did Charlotte feel disposed to put this bathroom issue in
Well,
there?
this has been a ordinance. There are versions of this all over the country, and there haven't been problems. Columbia, South Carolina has one. Myrtle Beach has one. Des Moines, Iowa has one. Minneapolis has one. This has been going on for a long time. Just think about it this way. Caitlyn Jenner, who all of us know who she is, if she came to North Carolina and went to Charlotte now, she'd be forced to use the men's room. You say we agree on that discrimination is wrong. There was an amendment on the House floor. Since we're talking about discrimination, the Republicans were bragging we're going to have, for the first time, a statewide non-discrimination ordinance. Greer Martin says, good, let's extend that to sexual orientation so we can prevent gay and lesbian people from being denied services. And that bill was tabled by Paul Stammen. It didn't even come up to a vote. So there's not agreement in North Carolina about discrimination. The special session was called specifically about bathrooms. A bill was released an hour and a half before a committee met. Nobody had seen it. I wanted to hear testimony from experts about the legal ramifications. I wanted to hear police chiefs from other towns, as legislative staff, find out what actually has happened around the country. None of that happened because, as Joe Mavretic has said, this was about politics. And unfortunately, a lot of people got caught in the crosshairs and now are going to be discriminated against.
I'm just sort of getting an idea you didn't like what they did.
I thought it was outrageous, actually.
Becki, public opinion polls show that the residents of our state don't agree with the Charlotte ordinance.
You're exactly right. There have been polls that have been done just in the last couple of days, and you're exactly right. And the General Assembly acted on this. Now, it was not only just the bathroom ordinance, although that has certainly been getting a lot of talk, but it also was an overreach on local government's part. And that was a big part of what the General Assembly came in to do, was to address this in Charlotte, not only with the transgender bathroom issue, but also with minimum wage and interfering in people's business. You know, you can't do that, and you certainly can't do it at the local level. There was a lot of discussion at the General Assembly about having consistency across the state with these different provisions.
But why didn't they have a consistent bill and approve an amendment not to discriminate against gay and lesbian people? Why should a taxi driver in any city in North Carolina be able to say, I don't want to pick you up because you're gay. I don't want to pick you up because you're Jewish. Oh, wait, I can't do that, but I don't have to pick you up because you're gay. That's what the legislature did this week.
But a lot of the discussion was these anti-discrimination pieces are already in place.
That one's not in place. It's not already. No, it's not. It's not against the law for somebody to say, I'm not picking you up because you're gay. That is illegal in North Carolina. It would have been illegal in Charlotte. Now it's legal again in Charlotte. And they had a chance to make that statewide, and they decided not to. That's a fact.
And also, going back to Becki's first point, I think this is a case where a lot of people don't know how North Carolina is organized. And I think the General Assembly, the legislative branch, just said, listen, cities and counties, you are creatures of the state. And when you go in a direction that the majority of the members of the House and Senate think are wrong, we're going to rein you in. This is a clear shot across the bow to every major urban area in North Carolina.
But the flip side of that coin, John, is the fact that our legislature has become increasingly intrusive in local government politics and some issues which they probably shouldn't be involved with.
Well, this objection, which on some matters I would agree that the local government should have been given more flexibility. On other matters I agree that the state should preempt. But what's really entertaining is when people attempt to argue this is actually contrary to conservatism to tell local governments what to do. This is like someone who takes a semester of French and claims to be fluent in the language. If the state forbids local governments from intruding on people's rights, that is not an increase in government. That is a decrease in government. They need to get their story straight. But look, again, whatever you think about the legislature's response to the ordinance itself was not like most ordinances in the country. Most ordinances in the country do not let men walk into women's bathrooms. It was a huge mistake. They knew it when they did it. They knew this was going to happen when they did it. They provoked this fight with Raleigh. They didn't just do their thing and hope for the best. They knew the legislature would overturn it when they passed it.
Well, and John, to your point too, this is happening across the country. There are many other places. Chris, you mentioned other cities in the United States have these ordinances, and other state governments are coming in and saying, no way.
Joe, final word from you.
Well, for $43,000, the Republicans got an extraordinary amount of publicity in the general election.
Not sure it's all good.
Well, here's a reminder, there's much more on our website, ncspin.com or ncspin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and our weekly column. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com or ncspin on Facebook or on Twitter at ncspintweets. After these messages, we're going to talk about Congressional and Judicial filings.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Baseball players from other countries are considered guest workers here. Baseball, the previous administration and Congress cut a deal in 2006 allowing foreign players to travel freely across the country. Not so for agriculture guest workers. They're vilified for doing work Americans won't, and they face a mountain of red tape just to get here. Shouldn't American agriculture get the same consideration as baseball? Farm Bureau and Agriculture, we keep North Carolina growing.
1 in 5 North Carolinians can't buy healthy foods in their communities, increasing their risk of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some forms of cancer. It's time to invest in the Healthy Corner Store initiative. Visit ncallianceforhealth.org to learn more.
We now return to NC Spin.
When the Court of Appeals 3-judge panel determined that North Carolina's congressional districts were unconstitutional, the legislature met in special session and redrew the maps. Almost simultaneously, another panel of Superior Court judges ruled North Carolina's retention law that allowed Supreme Court justices to face, disallowed them from facing an actual opponent, was also unconstitutional. Filings for both started March 16th and ended Friday of this past week. And while the National Republican Party is in crisis over Donald Trump's bid for the nomination, our state Republican Party is staging a revolt against party chair Hassan Harnett. We want our panel to sound off on these subjects, and Becki, let's begin with the controversy at the state Republican Party. It surfaced when Hassan Harnett complained about the email account, his email account being blocked, but it devolved into a vote of no confidence by the party executive committee. Shed some light on what's going on with state Republicans.
Well, it seems like we have a new reality show here in North Carolina, The Real Housewives of the NCGOP, which of course is the sequel to last season's blockbuster, The Real Housewives of the North Carolina Democratic Party. You know, we've seen this in North Carolina where both parties have been in disarray. There's been questions to the leadership. There's been a lot of unsettled business going on. Most recently, 60 members of the state GOP Central Committee looked at some of the things that have been going on. There were questions about email accounts, about security breaches, about even the chairman of the state party closing down one website where people were registering for the state convention and setting up another one to divert those funds.
And changing the prices to go to the
which
annual,
is, I think, you know, pretty illegal. And some other questions of leadership, being able to get along with staff, managing staff, fundraising has come into question. And so they seem to be addressing this at the state GOP.
So, Joe, how disruptive is this going to be? We talked about elections in the last segment. Is this going to hurt Republicans?
No, I don't think significantly, given redistricting and the races that are not opposed. But here's my take on this. We always talk about this person who nobody can get along with, and so let's get rid of them. What nobody ever says is, how did that person get there? Who were all of the people who checked off and said, this is the right person? You know, if the Republican Party is trying to outreach, having a black party chairman in North Carolina ought to be a really good idea. And I suspect that there were a lot of Republicans who made the decision to hire him that said, let's do this, this is a great idea. But I don't see any of them standing up now and defending their decision to hire. And that bothers me.
All right, I want to talk about some of the specific elections while the Republicans fuss and fight amongst themselves. Talk about some of the specific elections that we've seen in the filing period, and I have to qualify this by saying that these are the names that we know at the time this show is recorded late in the week. John, let's talk about the election for Supreme Court Justice. Because of that challenge to the retention law, there are 3 candidates for this nonpartisan race. Obviously, Justice Bob Edmonds, who was involved in it, Sabre Ferris, who was an unaffiliated voter and was one of the persons who originated the initial lawsuit, and Wake Superior Court Judge Mike Morgan, who's a registered Democrat. What happens on June 7th?
Voters vote.
All right, but with 3, okay, but with 3 candidates in the race.
We've got to get it down to 2.
We have to get it down to 2.
Yeah. And then you go to the general
so
election.
So the top 2 vote getters go to the general election.
That is my understanding, yes.
All right, Chris, any handicapping on that race at this point?
No, certainly going to be interesting. I mean, Justice Edmonds has obviously run statewide before. Sabra, as a one woman and with 2 men in the race, you got to think that she has a legitimate chance. But this is, and Mike Morgan is a sitting judge. So these are all 3 candidates who are certainly qualified. It's going to be interesting to see how they can raise money in this short amount of time and get their name out. That's going to be the big struggle.
All right, let's.
Tom, one question, one comment about Sabra. You know, Sabra brought this to the courts. Well, I would hope that because she had enough courage to bring this to the courts and triumph, that she at least be given a chance in the election.
All right, let's get into some of the congressional races. Probably the most interesting and heated at this point in time is the 2nd congressional district, in which George Holding, who was sort of gerrymandered out of his 13th congressional district seat, is now finding himself living in the 2nd district and plans to run against Renee Elmers, the incumbent congressman there. But it doesn't stop there, because Greg Brannon, who just recently lost the election for U.S. Senate nominee, and John McNeil are also in that contest. This is going to be really interesting, isn't it?
It is, and actually, George Holding doesn't live in that district. His old district looks like that. He knows a lot of people in that district. His family's from that district. And of course, for congressional races, you don't have to even live in the district, which adds to even more confusion and sort of the free-for-all with this. And the other thing, don't forget, going into these primaries, that the person that gets the most votes wins that. We're not going to have a second primary. So
yeah.
some of these seats, we're going to see a lot of candidates in there that could win that with 20, 25% of the vote.
I know that 3rd District Congressman Walter Jones is a good friend of yours, Joe, and as always, he has primary opposition. Phil Law has filed to run against him.
And he only wins by about 70+%. Every time.
I ask you, do you see any real problem with his reelection?
I would hope not, because Walter is really a voice of common sense in the House.
All right, let's get to the 4th district, where incumbent Democrat David Price, a supposedly safe seat, has 2 challenges: Republicans Sue Googe and Taji Kimball. Handicap that for what you know about it.
Well, I don't think the Republican primary is going to matter much. It'd be a shocking result if David Price is not reelected. I mean, part of the Republican plan was to have 3 Democratic districts and make sure they're very Democratic and put all the Democratic votes in them.
All right. So in the 5th district, we've got Virginia Fox, incumbent Republican. She's got a challenge from Patty Curran. You see any problems for Fox?
I'm going to go out on a limb and mix my metaphors and say that Fox will guard that hen house.
Oh. That's
all. Just to keep things going.
That leaves me speechless. In the 8th district, we get over to incumbent Richard Hudson, Republican. He's going to face Tim DiNunzio, who has run before. You see any challenge there?
Well, I understand Tim DiNunzio has pretty deep pockets and can self-fund an election, so that might pose somewhat of a challenge for Richard Hudson, but I think as the incumbent, I think Richard Hudson has established a pretty strong record. Maybe a little bit of interest.
Robert Pittenger, the legislature really messed with that 9th congressional district. Robert Pittenger's got a primary challenge from Todd Johnson. John, comment on that one.
Todd Johnson, I believe, was the 8th district chairman, but he got moved into the 9th district, so he decided to run for Congress. Why not?
Yeah.
That district is completely different now. It starts in the Charlotte area, but it follows the South Carolina line all the way down to, I think, Robinson County.
All right, we get to the 12th district, and this has been completely revamped. This was the former ink blot district that Alma Adams, who lives in Greensboro, had represented. She's saying she's going to move to Charlotte. But she's also got challenges from Democrats Tricia Cotham, Rodney Moore, Malcolm Graham, Carla Cunningham. This one's going to be interesting, Joe.
Well, it's going to be interesting, if not for any other reason than Alma's hats are always interesting.
And finally, we get to the 13th, which is a newly redrawn district and moved further to the west. Here we've got Republican legislators Andrew Brock, John Blust, and Democrat Bruce Davis filed for that seat. Is this a Republican or Democratic seat?
It's a Republican seat, but I don't think it's overwhelmingly a Republican seat. What's fascinating, you have a lot of sitting state legislators who are also running for re-election to the state General Assembly. So if they lose the bid for Congress in the primary, they can still run in the general election if they've already won the primary for their state House seats.
That's called insurance.
Yeah.
All right, after these messages, we're going to continue to trash the Coal Ash Commission on ash.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
It's a fact, patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
1 in 5 North Carolinians can't buy healthy foods in their communities, increasing their risk of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some forms of cancer. It's time to invest in the Healthy Corner Store initiative. Visit ncallianceforhealth.org to learn more.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
In response to the potential problems caused by coal ash reservoir spills, the legislature set up a coal ash commission to deal with the cleanup. They appointed the majority of members of this board, setting off a lawsuit from Governor McCrory and 2 former governors who felt that the lawmakers had exceeded their constitutional powers concerning balance of power. The courts agreed, essentially leaving the commission toothless. Governor McCrory responded recently by abolishing this commission, saying the work of the Coal Ash Management Act would revert to the Department of Environmental Quality. Chris, the coal ash problem is very controversial and to many is frightening because of the potential problems with water contamination. Did McCrory do the right thing in abolishing the commission, and can citizens have confidence that DEQ now, I used to be Diener for so many years, that the problems are being properly addressed?
Well, I think given all the press releases and reduction of fines and all the questions, I think it's hard to have a lot of confidence in DEQ, and the General Assembly didn't have confidence in them either. That's why the much ballyhooed legislation created this commission to evaluate what DEQ was doing and how to clean these things up. I think whether the governor should have abolished it or not, if the General Assembly is serious about oversight, they will reinstate the Coal Ash Commission with constitutional appointments.
Becki, so far as we're concerned, the legislature is coming back into session on April 25th. They acted a little disappointed in the governor's actions because they said they were going to reconstitute it and name new members.
Well, actually, it was the Supreme Court that got rid of the commission.
Right.
The governor just as an administrative
Lawsuit,
thing.
yes.
Yeah, right. But you know, the thing, don't forget too that the bill that was put into place in 2014, the Coal Ash Management Act, has a lot of teeth in it. It is the strongest, most stringent laws in the country that deal with this kind of thing. So that's in place. So whether we have a commission, the law's in place that this has to be done, and DEQ is moving forward with
Joe
this.
answered the question I asked Chris. Should the citizens have confidence that DEQ is going to be able to properly address, particularly since Governor McCrory worked for Duke Energy for 20 years?
I think they're going to have to earn it. I don't think it comes just because of DEQ.
All right. So how is this going to affect, John, the relationship which is already strained between the legislature and the governor?
Well, the elimination of the commission was academic exercise. It was required by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decision has already structured that relationship.
All right, after these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Baseball players from other countries are considered guest workers here. Baseball, the previous administration and Congress cut a deal in 2006 allowing foreign players to travel freely across the country. Not so for agriculture guest workers. They're vilified for doing work Americans won't, and they face a mountain of red tape just to get here. Shouldn't American agriculture get the same consideration as baseball? Farm Bureau and Agriculture, we keep North Carolina growing.
Now we come to one of the favorite parts of the show when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Joe Mavretic, I'll start with you.
On the second floor of the Museum of History is the Cashin Conference Room. In that room is a table, 3 parts with a sideboard. The table's made out of heart pine. It came out of the old Cannon Mills Pilotech company. On one side of the room is a plaque for Pop Cashin, who was a great historian at Chapel Hill and at NC State. The table seats 18. It has 2 8-foot sections and one 29 3/4 inches. Beautiful design. The Epsilon chapter of Phi Gamma Delta Brothers paid for it, and Mike Easley built it.
How about that?
Well, I'll top that.
That is good news. Chris, tell us something we don't know.
I've talked before on the show about the achievement school district concept, which other states have tried, not so successfully, which converts a lot of low-performing public schools into charters, which sometimes are run by for-profit companies. They're trying to expand that to make it more amenable to Democrats. That will be maybe the defining education issue of the short session.
John, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, our viewers may be familiar with a series of troubling reports about Elizabeth City State University and its various management and financial and enrollment problems. Just to put the number in perspective, almost a quarter of students recently from Elizabeth City State are in default on their student loans.
Interesting. Becki, tell us something we don't know.
On a holiday note, for many years, North Carolina celebrated Easter Monday as the Easter holiday. It actually goes back to 1909 when Easter Monday was set aside as a day of rest and recovery from some sort of raucous Easter celebrations, I guess. But in 1935, Senator Paul Grady shepherded a bill through the General Assembly that made Easter Monday the official holiday for Easter.
It was also the date that Wake Forest and NC State played baseball.
Exactly, because he was a Wake Forest graduate, and exactly because the legislators wanted to get off to be able to see NC State and Wake Forest play baseball.
Good news.
Happy Easter.
All right. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. Join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.